So then we now got to a point where we're entering into, high debt levels in terms of debt sustainability, and we had to be able to now look critically on how we claw back. And that is why we anchored the 2021 budget on debt sustainability, and we said that we were not going to increase the debt in excess of, trying to keep it at the same levels as it was in 2020.
What's the debt situation now?
Right now, as of November 2022, we're looking at debt levels of about 78.9% to GDP.
78.
Yes, please.
Okay, so at 78.9%,
yeah.
Are we a hippie country?
No, the thing about your debt is that as a percent of GDP, there are countries that have debt to GDP of 150%, 120%.
And they are not HIPIC?
They are not HIPIC. Because it's not really about your debt to GDP, but it's the cost of servicing that debt. Mm-hmm. That is where your concern should be. Mm-hmm. So there are people or there are countries that may have debt to GDP of 150%, but the percentage of their revenue that they use to service the debt, pay interest and so forth, is less than 10 or 15%.
Oh, okay. So if you're earning a lot of revenue,
yes,
and a small percentage of your revenue is paying the debt,
yes,
irrespective of the quantum of the debt,
yes,
you are sustainable.
Yeah, fine. You're sustainable.
Is that what we are?
No, we are not, because unfortunately, due to our high domestic interest rates, we're seeing more and more of our revenue going towards servicing this debt. And it was manageable before COVID because we knew that was the situation, so we were watching our debt levels keenly. Right now, the levels we are getting to is beginning to become a problem. So, and that is why it's so important that we reduce the amount of borrowing going forward, and we focus more on increasing our revenue, so that component of interest expense payments will become a smaller and smaller percentage of our total revenue. And also that will also provide us with resources other than debt to finance and pay for our expenditures, which will mean that we'll borrow less, which will mean that interest rates will come down, based just essentially because it's a supply and demand situation.
Okay. Final one on the HIPIC situation.
Yeah.
The FITCH, I've been reading something from the internet. FITCH has downgraded our credit rating to -B,
yes,
which apparently has not happened since 2002 or so.
Yeah.
That's bad news, isn't it?
It is bad news, and it's quite unfortunate. However, I must say that Moody's and S&P are already at B-. Fitch was the only one that was holding out at B, and they then decided to follow the others and move to B-, meaning that they are all now at par. But essentially, they highlighted some concerns, and I think the key one for me there, which was of concern to me, was the fact that they highlighted the closure of market access.
What does that mean? Okay, first of all, the B-, let me explain to people. Let's explain to people who don't understand, who are maybe lawyers or doctors and they don't understand. Our credit rating is B-. It means that what?
It means that, okay, so you have what you call investment grade ratings. Those are in the A category, depending on what is, so it goes from AAA, AA, single A. Then you come into maybe sub-investment grade, where you're getting into junk bond, high yield territories.
No, we've lost you. We don't understand anything you say.
Now,
so if I am now, who is this ratings for? Who is the target? Is it banks? Is it Barclays Banks? Is it in London? Is it HSBC Bank? Is it the Ghana Commercial Bank? Who are they targeting?
Put it this way: all borrowing entities.
Those who borrow, who are borrowing.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not targeted to the lenders; it's to the borrowers.
It is a way of pricing the risk associated with the borrower.
Okay, so they are telling you that be careful about this borrower.
Exactly.
If you lend money
because
to
it's
him,
highly risky, And if you lend money to him,
he might not be able to pay.
He might not be able to pay.
At the time you said he should pay.
Yeah, exactly.
And so therefore, you should lend it at a higher rate.
Exactly. Charge him more interest.
Ah, I see.
Yes.
Okay, so I'm a lending institution. I'm looking at many countries, and they say that Ghana is B minus. Okay.
Yes.
So I want to give Ghana 70 billion. Okay, Ghana is B minus. I would normally have given Ghana 70 billion at a rate of 5%.
Yes.
That means they'll pay me back 70 billion plus 5% in 2 years. Now I will say, Ghana, I'll give it to you, but 20% in 1 year. Something like that?
Something like that. But not that big a jump. I mean, usually you would see maybe a 1 to 2% jump for every notch in rating.
Ah, okay.
Right.
Okay.
You know what I mean? Okay.
So it's not that very different.
Yeah, but you know, it makes a big difference. So like a AAA country right now, I don't know who's AAA.
America?
And I don't think America got downgraded. But let's assume they are AAA. They are borrowing 10-year money at 1%. Right?
So they borrowed $300 billion at 1%.
1%, right? So imagine, what's that? So they've borrowed $300 billion at 1%. Your interest you pay is $3 billion a year, right? We are borrowing the same $300 billion at, for ease of calculation, around 9%, but let's just make it 10% so we can compare, right? Because we are B minus rating. That means that our interest payment will be 30 billion. So for the same borrowing, one person is paying 3 billion, another person is paying 30 billion. That tells you the cost incurred in that kind of rating downgrade. You know, so for every sort of notch of downgrade, as another billion or another 3 billion that you pay. You see, until you get to a point where you're paying so much more in interest servicing costs than somebody else.
How can we reverse this?
We can, you know, so some of the concerns that were raised were about our revenue targets and that they were a bit ambitious. And that exactly is predicated on new tax measures like the e-levy. So one way to reverse this is to make sure that we increase our revenue generation. We are very low on our revenue generation capacity. For example, I think as of end of 2021, we're going to end at about a tax revenue to GDP of about 13.3%. Now, on
tax revenue to GDP. Okay, 13.3%.
13.3%. Now, most countries.
What's the average?
The average for our peers is about between 18 to 20%. There are some countries where their tax revenue to GDP is about 30%.
So we are low.
Oh, we're very low.
In this 13%, is e-levy factored in?
No.
Okay.
If we factor in the e-levy for 2020, we'll move to about 16%.
Okay.
You know, but let me put it in perspective because I think it's very important. Now, the total GDP for 2022 is 500 billion projected. 502 billion, but let's assume 500 billion just for ease of calculation. 1% of that, every 1% of that is 5 billion. So if I move my tax to GDP from 13% to 15%, is 2% points times 5 billion. That means that's 10 billion more in revenue that I'm generating. I move it to 16, it's 15 billion, 17 is 20 billion, and so forth and so on. So you can see how much money we are leaving on the table by the inefficiency in our tax collection and our revenue measures. Now, of course, because we have such a huge informal economy, the traditional tax collection mechanisms do not really work and are not that efficient, you know. And I mean, VAT, for example, you know, there are a lot of sales and transactions and services that happen outside of the formal economy, and so a lot of people don't pay VAT on services. You know, corporate taxes, even personal income tax. We have only 2.4 million people that pay personal income tax. If you compare that to 17.1 million registered active mobile money subscribers, that tells you there's a big problem here because, you know, we can't have only, are we saying that only 2.4 million people in Ghana earn a living and are getting a salary or some form of income stream? So really, we have to come up with more and new innovative ways of bringing people into the tax net and being able to expand the number of Ghanaians that shoulder the burden of providing the much needed resources to pay for all the programs and social activities that we have as a country, including free healthcare and free education and so forth.